Welcome to Awakening Warriors podcast, where we talk about life, lessons, learning, and love. Yeah? Life lessons, love, and learning. That's not right.
Life lessons, learning, and love.
So I said it right.
What are you talking about today? Life lessons, learning, or love?
Life, and probably lessons, and learning, and maybe some love.
Self-love.
That's where I was going. I finally have my own shirt, so that's exciting. I've been wearing his.
For like weeks now. Weeks and weeks. At least a month.
Yeah.
Finally getting back to some normalness with everybody gone now. So that's very nice.
We don't have family here, and we're going to be here, and so doing some work on the yard and getting our habits in.
Yeah, we've been super consistent as of recently for at least 2 weeks, the minimum. Maybe even a little bit longer. So I've worked now 9 days in a row. And it doesn't even, like, my body can definitely feel it, but, like, mentally, I still feel good. Because usually I get, like, a fatigue, like, mentally. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so fucking tired. And, you know. But I never even looked, and I just happened to look today, and I was like, that's a lot of L's on there. Because I track my habits on my planner. So, like, I track my cold baths. I track my meditation. I track my working out and my yoga and everything else that I do. And
so L is lift,
yeah,
not loss.
and technically I didn't lift today, but we did sprint, so which is a whole task. Well, I worked out 9 days straight, so I'm pretty confident I'll get tomorrow as well. So, but anyways, that's kind of what we're talking about today. The concept of self-mastery. So, and to me, this is what life is all about. Because we grow up and we get these habits and patterns and everything else. And we've talked about similar concepts before, like triggers and stuff like that. You know, the triggers. But this is just a broader array of everything coming together, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, of all the aspects, like a more generalized, because, like, yeah, we've gone into some specifics, but
We all become fucked up individuals, you know, some more than others, out of our childhood. And, you know,
I wouldn't say we all. I mean, there are parents out there that are
they're still fucked up.
They're still,
one way or another.
I don't know, whatever.
They're still fucked up one way or another. Like, you had a very, you know...
No, we talked about ours. I'm talking, even like Dave DeSalt's kids. Like, you think that they're going to come into this world
they'll still be fucked
up individuals. They might have aspects of themselves that need evolution and growth, but I don't know that I'd consider that fucked up because we all have that. But anyway.
They'll have fucked up. Some kids are going to resent him for the way he was because, you know, like, some kids got rewarded better than others. And, you know, like, no matter what, they're going to have their traumas. So...
That to me, though, doesn't equal fucked up, but we're all going to have our stuff.
I think you just fucking get so attached to words, it's just...
Well, being concise and clear is important to me.
Yeah, well...
That is something I value.
Anyways, the concept today is self-mastery. And I'll read you a little, excerpt of Tao Te Ching, the Book of the Way. And he says, "The light overcomes the heavy, and the stillness overcomes the frantic. The wise never forget their dignity, though sounded by dazzling sights, they remain calm and unmoved. How did it happen that the emperor master of 10,000 chariots lost his empire? Being flippant himself, he lost the respect of his subjects. Failing to control himself, he lost control of the empire." So as a child, that's kind of what you're teaching your child is like self-mastery, right? We come into this world, and we have, emotions and thoughts that we may or may not act upon, and then the whole concept is in my personal opinion, the whole concept of life is to, overcome those thoughts or discipline those thoughts, or like learn to respond to those emotions. Um, I do think that you have control, like you can choose your emotions to some degree by your attachment to certain things, But I also understand no matter what, you're always going to have those emotions. You'll have the whole array of emotions. And the concept is to master how you respond to those emotions, Like if you have anxiety, whether you give in to that anxiety and allow that to be your crutch and shit like that, or depression or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Is that podcast over then?
Boom. The end. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the topic of today of mastering yourself, that, like you said, thoughts, emotions, I mean...
Body. You can master your body. I think those go hand in hand, though, just typically, like, people that get overweight, they'll have emotional issues and they just cope with food, typically, is what I've seen.
Right. And a lot of the way that we operate, we talk about this, but has been programmed, yes, from childhood, yes, from our parents, from society, from TV, from whatever. But when you start to become aware and take changes and start to like intentionally involve instead of just by default evolving the way that you've been programmed, then you're able to master these different areas of your life, or at least start the process of getting to that point.
I think it's interesting, like when you look at like the general extremist liberal side, like typically people they're not about controlling their emotions and stuff like that. They're a lot they're basically like, I don't know, it's interesting. You know what I'm talking about? How like
kinda
they have safe spaces and stuff like that, and like I don't know. It's interesting because like when I see that side of things, and I'm talking about the extremist side of things, like they're typically like they're just loose cannons. They can't control their emotions. They'll flip out. And honestly, same thing. This is obviously goes for both sides because nothing's ever one-sided. But I find it just more prominent, I suppose, because these children grew up to be adults who were never taught how to control themselves essentially, and now they're like fucking grown adults and they throw temper tantrums and go and fucking riot and all this other shit because they never had the opportunity, or not the opportunity, but they were never taught how to control their emotions and control and bring those into positive aspects.
And like you said, being in control of those things doesn't mean you don't have them. Like, we are humans, we will always experience emotions and things that trigger us from now until we die. And so, but the point is to be able to become a master or a controller of those so that I think in my mind it makes me think about like being effective. Because we've talked about this last week. But when I get in those spaces where I'm out of control, I am no longer effective for you or for me. And like, what good does that do? Nothing. And so as children, I mean, as a therapist, it makes me think about like self-soothing and teaching your kid about emotions and all of those things. Like, in theory, parents should want to teach their children those things so that they can move through the world with more grace and more control and more mastery in all areas. Because we've talked about this too, if you have your internal stuff in check, everything that you do, that you produce, that you are a part of will be more meaningful, more effective, more calm, more intentional.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, as a parent, that's what kind of your goal is, to teach your children how to be self-masters of themselves. You know, like kids are little nut jobs, so they don't know anything from, you know, they don't know up from down. You know, if I was taught, you know, mindfulness and, you know, habits, like this is all fucking still new shit to me to a degree. I mean, I've only been doing this stuff for what? We'll say I'll fucking maybe 10 years at the most. You know.
And I feel like that's a lot.
Yeah. 10 years at the most, so, you know, a third of my life essentially. But I also have to take into effect, hey, there's boundaries. Squirrel. We're just talking about that book with my dad. So, anyways, I have to take an effect like 0 to 7 is every child's most detrimental, you know, like impact essentially of their lives and how their brain operates and shit like that.
Well, yeah, if you look at like brain development, like from 0 to 7, it's like exponentially insane, the growth, and then it like, not that it slows down because it still continues obviously, but
yeah, the influences are just much greater. So, you know, I have to fight all that previous poor programming, and so really I'm still, you know, you figure I'm 10 years old into this, you know, personal development journey, so I'm still a child essentially in my mind. And there's so much, there's levels to this game, you know, like you just keep hitting the new levels and the new levels and the new levels. And like, yeah. So if I were taught these things, meditation, mindfulness, to read positive things in a much younger childhood, then I'd be much further in life than I would be as far as self-mastery. You know, I still have triggers, and I've come a long ways for sure. You know, I've made leaps and bounds. I'm not saying that I haven't, but you know, if I would have been equipped those tools much sooner, and I would have been like, you know, taught like life is about self-mastery. You know, you see that thing that irritated you, that's a trigger. You see that, you know how you feel when you see this, that's an attachment, you know, and those things, like,
and here's how you can manage those and deal with those. And
yeah, exactly. And your life becomes much fuller because you're so much more aware, you know. So the whole consciousness allows for self-mastery, you know, and the deeper level of consciousness you get allows for the deeper self-mastery.
And that's super empowering, because when you think the opposite of that, it's like everything's just happening to me, and why is this happening to me, and oh, this person made me feel this way. Like, it gives so much power to everybody else and all these external things. When you are focused more on self-mastery and the consciousness, like, you are fully empowered then to move forward in this thing, even though it's difficult, or you're fully empowered to make decisions for yourself versus just being at the whim of these outside things.
Yeah. It's like,
which, as like, even if you're working on self-mastery, like, you're not going to always get it perfect all the time. That's not necessarily the goal, to be perfect, but when you are working toward that and mastering your stuff, your own stuff, then yeah, it's just very empowering instead of being a victim to everything.
Yeah, for sure. Let's switch gears a little bit. So I look around and I see people being mastered by a lot of stuff, whether that's, you know, you might be mastered by drugs or alcohol, you might be mastered by the government, you might be mastered by your emotions. So then those things will master you instead of you mastering them.
Phone call.
So
if you choose to, or by default not choose to be a master of your life, then other things will step into that role.
Yeah, for sure. And then you're gonna live in a much more chaotic environment. And think you're gonna make poor choices and so on and so forth. If, you know, let's say if you're emotionally undisciplined and you have no mastery, no control over your emotions or no control over the response of your emotions, then you will make poor decisions, especially if you're making decisions in a high emotional state. Another side of that would be allowing other people to master you, whether that's, you know, you're mastered in the sense of, you know, you're their they're your puppeteer and you're the puppet, because they can control your emotions and manipulate you and control you, or the fact that, you know, like, you work in this particular job and you can't afford to, you know, move if you wanted to move. Let's say you live in a bad neighborhood or, you know, something of the sort, and then you're controlled by, you know, your finances, so you're not the master of your own finances, or the government, because the government, everybody wants to control you. That's so, in my mind, there's certain levels to corruption and to power in overall. So you have money, which, you know, allows for power, you know, because you can, that gives you options. You can buy things. Fuck, you can buy people for money. So money is a level of power. But then you have, like, actually influential power, which is where you're a massive influence and you know, you're Hitler and you can, you know, get everybody in an uprising and kill all the Jews and shit like that. That's a whole nother level of power. So basically, none of those people that have gone through, or all those people that went with his whole concept, you know, just didn't have any self-mastery. You know, he mastered them, whereas they were not able to master themselves. You know, they couldn't think for themselves. They didn't, you know how to.
And I think even in that, like, that's an extreme example, but I think even in that one, you hear later about the different levels of quote-unquote mastery that people had. Because there were people that, like, after the fact, Nazi soldiers would say, like, you know, I didn't think anything of it, I just went along with it, blah, blah, blah. So that's very little, if any, self-mastery. And then you have other people that were like, I questioned it at the beginning. I wasn't sure that this was the right thing. And so you can even hear, and again, an extreme example, but how people are at these different levels of that. And in the end, I mean, if they all went along with it, then clearly they weren't at this mastered level. But
yeah.
I just think even there's, like you said, there's different levels to this game, right? Like, I think in general, and not to compare, but I'm going to compare, are at a higher self-mastery level than I am, especially when it comes to emotions and discipline and things like that. You are. And I think we see that in the world. We're not all meant to be at the same level, but how then do we continue to evolve and grow?
That was particular because of sports, I believe. You know, I think sports create a lot of self-mastery, because it allows you to do things that you don't necessarily, like sprints today. You know, like me quitting. I quit on the first one or second one or whatever else, you know, before I should have. So, like, that was a poor self-mastery of myself, because I allowed myself to quit before the fucking end.
Which made me think I have, like, developed some mastery, because normally I would have been, like, complaining out loud. The only thing I remember saying, like, about the workout itself was, like, I might throw up this morning. Like, that was it. But in my head, we were at, like, 3 out of 10, plus the extra one that we had to do or whatever, and I was already, like, in my head, like, oh my god, we're only 30%, what the F? Like, and these are things that in the past I would have been saying out loud. Like,
yeah.
And so that's evolving for me.
That's a great example. Your mouth. You need to master your mouth. That's a part of yourself. A lot of people just run their fucking mouth and just blah, blah, blah. I see it all the time, especially with where I work. You know, the tenants and, you know, other individuals, they'll just, like, talk. It's just like, they just talk to talk. They're not talking to, you know, get a point across. They're just talking. Like, being able to shut the fuck up and, you know, just be, or just not have anything to say, like mastering your own tongue. So, it's just so interesting. And there's, like, often I'll have thoughts that just pop into my head, and I've expressed to you, you know, like, some of the random thoughts that I have, just like, and they're either very grotesque or very violent or, you know, whatever it might be, but I don't necessarily have an attachment to them by any means. There's just, like, my mind, it just boom, it's fucking popped into my head. Why it popped into my head, I don't know. There's, like, no correlation really, like, you know, but my, you know, interest in acting upon those things, because maybe does sound good, and I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds entertaining or whatever else, or but being able to have those thoughts and being able to have control of not enacting in those particular thoughts.
Right. And that, I mean, I feel like we kind of had a slight conversation with your dad this morning, but about your subconscious. Like, your subconscious is taking everything in. And I thought about that earlier when you said something about thoughts. Like, especially with our programming, we have automatic negative thoughts. And so those are the ones that just, like, pop into your head. Like, there they are. But then your ability to do something with that is what you can control. Because sometimes they just, like, in your example, something extreme and violent or whatever, like, pops into your head and, like, what the heck? But I think, like, on a more everyday basis, that might be negative self-talk or complaining or whatever, and sometimes those things just, like, pop into your head, which I think for me, grace and compassion comes into mind, because we are, like I said before, we're not going to always have it perfect, and just because we make a decision towards self-mastery doesn't mean that all of that stuff just erases because we've made that choice. But we do have the ability to, once that thing does pop into our head, or once we notice that emotion and we're not sure where it came from, to then master that aspect of it. And then doing that repeatedly will have an influence on those automatic thoughts and those automatic emotions.
For sure. And this shit's like a ripple effect. Like, if you master yourself and then you have children and you teach them self-mastery, like, think about the effect and, like, the ripples that it would have in regards to society. So,
and that we've talked about this too, but, like, it all starts in the family. It all starts in your household. But even smaller than that, it starts with you. So you as the husband, me as the wife, like, it starts with each of us. And then should we decide to have a family, then our ability to take our self-mastery seriously will then influence those kids. And then hopefully that will have an influence on those kids. And
yeah.
like, that's the ripple effect. And it's really cool to think about.
And that's where you just brought up an interesting thing, or I thought about it, whatever. Me trying to master you and you trying to master me. Like, it's not my job to control you. It's my job to give you hints and give you encouragement and give you concepts and, so on and so forth. But I'm not here to master you by any means, and you're not here to master me. Like, I'm not here to set some rules or whatever, within reason, obviously. Like, there are exceptions, I believe, to a degree, but that's, like, a healthy side of things, not a controlling side of things. Whereas I think, some parents they have, like, this power deal. Like, they always have to control their fucking kids. They always have to do whatever. Like, bro, just leave your fucking kids alone. They'll be fine.
I was just thinking about that, because, like, spouses, yes, but even parents to kids. Especially because, like, again, I think there's, like, this hierarchy for, like you're saying, that parents are the parents, so they know everything, and they need to control all the things, and it's like, I can't remember what book I was reading, but, like, kids have a lot of wisdom and a lot of things to teach, and if you just squander that because you're trying to master every aspect of their life, you are doing them a disservice.
Yeah, at some point,
and yourself.
Obviously within reason, you have to guide them and, discipline them, but there's also a lot of opportunity to just let them, learn themselves and master themselves, and, you don't have to control every little detail. And I find that, like, micromanaging, essentially, they're just micromanaging their children, and I was gonna say their children's lives, but
well, experience is the best teacher. So if you're always trying to control all of their experiences, you're no longer allowing their outcomes and how they do things or how they don't do things, and, like, you're no longer allowing them that experience.
Yeah. So then we move on to the government, because there's just different. They want to fucking master you. If you think about, like, socialism's a perfect example of, like, them trying to master you. You can only make so much money. You can only live this certain way. You can only do this. You have to
spend it here. You can't spend it there.
They want, and that's how the government, all governments are trying to move. They want to control your money. They want to, make sure that you don't support this cause, then, we're gonna fucking put a freeze on your bank account.
And it's like this vicious cycle, because I think a lot of the majority of people I feel like that support that are because like, look at the world, we're so messed up, we need someone to come in. But then it's like this vicious cycle, because then if the government is the master of all of these people, then these people no longer need to master themselves, and then it's just like this perpetuating.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know. Obviously, there's a lot more people in the world today, but like if you think of back in the day, or even more like rural places now, like there's not as much control and as much oversee Big Brother type stuff, and everybody's all right.
Yeah.
Like,
the only people that want to control other individuals are fucking psychopaths. Like that's the only people that are in our fucking Congress and shit. I'd say the majority. They're all fucking psychopaths. They want to fucking control you. They want to say you can't have guns. Why do you think they want to take your guns away? Because you can't be controlled if you have weapons. Like, if you can defend yourself, then you're not going to be controlled. And they want to control you. So you take away their fucking weapons, and then it's like, oh, okay, cool. Now we own you because we have the military and you have nothing. And, we'll just fucking make you be our slaves, essentially. Think about the old slave days. Like, they were controlled. They were bought, they were controlled, and they were used for profit, pleasure, whatever the case might be. And so, there's such a I don't know, how do I say this? Not necessity by any means, but like desire. There's such a desire for the power. And, I can say in my personal experience, like, you would not want me in a extreme powerful position. I wouldn't trust myself. I don't trust myself with that shit. Like, I've expressed to you, like, that fucking power, man, like, I like it. Like, like, not...
I wouldn't be voting for you.
Yeah. I wouldn't vote for... knowing me, I wouldn't vote for me either. Like, but I'm aware of that. And I'm like, I'm trying to overcome that. But, like, being a young man and, like, with the thought, like, because there's domination. Like, if you look back in the history of the Vikings and the fucking Spartans and everything else, they would rape and they'd pillage. And there's a lot of that still in myself. And you wouldn't want me to be fucking president or whatever, because, I have not mastered that part of me. Like, part of me is like, oh, I feel horrible, but then part of me is like, fuck yeah, motherfuckers. Like, oh, yeah, the power.
Oh, goodness.
So,
but yeah, awareness, right? Like, you have consciousness in that area that, like, this is still very much, would be a quote-unquote master of you if it came to it.
Yeah, the power would master me, and I would not master the power.
And that made me think, because when you brought up people want the power, I think about, like, how many of those people actually power or are masters of themselves? Like, not very many, but yet they want to control and have this power over all of these other people, which is interesting. Because it's like, if you can't even, as like a good leader, I think about that. If you can't even keep your own stuff in check, why would we want you to be leader or master or power over these people when you don't even have your own?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just insane.
And I think some of that, like, because even hearing about, like, your more, like, primal power type stuff, like, is that truly yours? Is that, like, generational stuff? Is that, I mean, there's maybe not even an answer to it, but it just makes me think about people's desire for that power and where that comes from, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's genetically in men. I think it's just like...
Okay. I've never been a guy, so I don't know.
I think it's just programmed. And then I think also part of it's probably my childhood. I know my mom always thinks she needs to fucking control the kids, like, all the time. Like, can't do this, you can do this, you can't do that, can't do this.
And I'm like, if we decide to have a family, I'm very much going to have to work on that, because I've come, even with, like, the dogs, and it sounds silly, but that's my experience. Like, I've come a long way with kind of just allowing some of that, but yeah. So, like, as you sit here and say that, my mind thinks, like, I would want to, and it's more of, like, coming from, because I would be feeling, experiencing sensations of anxiety, and I would want to control to make sure whatever, but still, that's still
control the outcome.
Yeah.
And that's a power thing, too, but yours is probably just a different driver.
Yeah.
Yours is probably safety or some bullshit.
I was just saying comfort, because if, like, if they're quote-unquote safe, then I feel comfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus this, I need to control this little human to do what I want because that's exciting to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that.
Yep. So, yeah, and the only way that you can really become a self-master of yourself is, like, putting in the fucking work. Like, and if you don't self-master yourself, someone else will. You know, I know that for a fact. Like, I love manipulating people because it's so entertaining when you find their triggers. Like, I got this from my mom. You know, you find their fucking triggers, and then you can just poke and prod at them. They're like your little puppet, and you can fucking just get them all pissed off, and riled up, and everything else, and you own them. You fucking own them at that point. And if I can own you, like, that's, you know, like fighters do that shit a lot. You know, they try to get their opponent. Yeah, they try to get their opponents all riled up with anger and whatever else, and, you know, like, so then they're not thinking clearly. They can't make rational decisions because they're enraged or whatever. They lost control. They're not. They lost their self mastery.
And then they're no longer effective.
Yeah, exactly. They're no longer effective because they're you know, just thinking what he said or about his fucking family or whatever else, you know, and that's stupid. You know, you need to build a mind that's fortitude. That's just a fortress. Fortress.
Fortitude is a word, but not in the way that you're using it.
You need to fortitude your mind.
With fortitude. You need to strengthen your mind with fortitude.
Sure.
Anyway.
And there's so many books out there that are fucking awesome. I don't know why, but my eye just caught Course in Miracles.
Which I've never read. Just about every book every book, but it's referenced everywhere.
Fucking tough, dude. It is.
Did you start that?
Yeah. I read maybe a quarter of it, maybe. And David told me to keep going, but I just never did. He's like, just read it slow, you don't have to finish it. I think it took him like over a year to finish it, he said. Because it's like a tough read. Like, it's good, but it's got a lot of good shit in it. Maybe I should break it out. I'll break it out after the podcast. Kind of
anyway.
Read excerpts of it. It's like the Bible. It's probably bigger than the Bible. But anyways. Yeah, and, you know, you can, it's a constant practice of self-mastery.
Oh, absolutely.
You're going to start somewhere one day, and then you'll do a little bit better the next, and then the next day you'll do a little bit better, you know.
No journey is linear.
And then you'll suck one day.
Some days it's easier to step into that master role for yourself, and other days it's freaking out the window and you don't even know where it went.
Yeah, but and I feel like, I don't know, I guess people tend to try to control the external things, typically, like their children or their spouse, and that gives them control or comfort or power or whatever it is, and then they don't actually work on themselves. They just put that to the wayside, and
which then everything that comes from you is like futile because it's not real mastery. It's like this. It's not artificial necessarily because you can have control over things to a degree, but it's not fertile, futile, fertile. Like, it's not fertile ground. It's not fertile actions. It's not fertile because you don't actually have full control over anything outside of yourself.
For sure. Well, I think that's really about it. I mean, talking about the government, talking about children, talking about ourselves, kind of talked about our spouses and stuff, emotions, finances are a huge thing to have, you know, self-mastery over, because if you don't have any money, guess what, you're kind of limited on what you can offer your family and the experiences that you have and where you live.
The influence you can have.
Yeah, the influences that you can have. Boundaries, that's the other thing that I was going to mention is having boundaries and your self-mastery, you know, like with yourself even.
Having boundaries is a part of self-mastery.
Yeah, yep. So with your wife, with your kids, and with yourself, like, boundaries are extremely important. Saying, you know, if I say I'm going to do this, because I thought about, like, cutting them short, and I was like, you know what, fuck it. Because after Wes said that, you know, like, not doing that. Like, it's been very prominent in my mind. Anytime that I want to give up and quit and, you know, like not finish what I say I'm going to do, I'm like, my subconscious mind is going to remember that. I'm like, I have to finish. There's no other choice. I have to finish. You know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I know the concept. I don't know.
So basically, you know, he talked about anytime that you break your word to yourself, your subconscious, you know, takes a little
Oh, yeah.
hit. So then, you know, like this morning when I was doing the fucking sprints, I was like, fuck, I don't have to do all 10. And then I was like, well, fuck.
Then we did 12.
I don't have to do the last one. I mean, I technically already did it, but then you called me out anyway. So then I was like, well, my mind's gonna know that I cheated on that. So I'm like, well, man, fucking do it again.
Well, and even, that's why I was like, we did 12 because the one to the trailer. And you were like, oh, I was counting that. But when we did the one to the trailer and then we came back, you were like, you said something about, we gotta do 10. And so I was like, oh, that was one. Not the one to the trailer, but the one we just did. So that's why you were like, oh, I was counting that. And I was like, oh, I wasn't.
So then one of us fucked up on count. I don't know.
We did 12 total, including the first one we did to the trailer. Then we did 10. And then we did that extra one.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, obviously I wasn't quitting because you weren't going to quit, but, and my brain's talking to me, like, because like I said, at 3, I kept saying 30% in my head. I was like, oh my God, we still have so much more. But I'm like, it's all right. Every time we go, we're knocking one down, and soon I'll be closer to the end. And I remember being like, why couldn't you have said 8?
And even that, like, you know, there's self-mastery and that whole thing, because you didn't say anything and you finished them out, and, you know, like, yeah. Habits are a great way to master yourself. Just, yeah, because, like, you have to do them. Like, you're doing them regardless of how you feel emotionally or, you know, physically or whatever else. If you say you're going to do it, just fucking do it.
Even little stuff, like sprints, I wouldn't say that's a huge thing for us to do, but we haven't done sprints in a long time. And so, like, doing that and getting up in the morning and running when it's still dark and whatever, like, it wasn't super fun. But even small stuff like, oh, I said I was going to clean the garage today. Then clean the garage today.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
or I said I was going to bring the kids to the park. Bring the kids to the park.
Yeah.
Just small things like that are wins still.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think that wraps us up. Thanks for joining us. Follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook.
Subscribe on YouTube.
Feel free to add us as a friend. And yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.